The first thing Riley Stone felt was the wind. It came in hard off Elliott Bay, cold and damp, pushing against the thin fabric of her navy scrubs. The rooftop of Harbor Crest Medical Center was a concrete island above the city ringed with low safety rails and humming metal units. The helipad lights painted everything in a harsh white glow, turning the night sky the color of bruised steel. She stood 3 feet from the edge toes, almost touching the painted warning line. Beneath her 7 stories of empty air dropped to the parking lot in Ambulance Bay. From up here, the traffic lights looked small and far away, a quiet constellation of red and amber. Behind her, the heavy door to the stairwell clanged shut. Riley did not turn. Her fingers flexed once at her sides, then went still. The wind tugged at her dark ponytail and carried the faint smell of rain and exhaust. Somewhere below, muffled by concrete and distance, a cardiac monitor let out a steady, distant beep. In a place like this, that sound never really stopped. Miss Stone. The voice came from behind her, smooth and measured. Dr. Conrad Vale stepped out from the shadow of a ventilation unit suit jacket, open tie loosened just enough to suggest long hours and noble sacrifice. The helipad light caught the silver at his temples and the practiced concern in his eyes. "You really picked the wrong hospital to lie to," he said. Riley kept her gaze on the city. From this angle, she could see the reflection of Harbor Crest's glass facade, the big blue letters glowing over the main entrance. The building looked solid from here, permanent. It was a useful illusion. "Is that what you think this is about?" she asked. Her voice was low, almost conversational. The only sign of strain was a thin line of dried blood at the edge of the small scar above her left eyebrow, a pale crescent that cut through her brow like an old crack in porcelain. Conrad walked closer, shoes whispering over painted concrete. "You falsified your credentials," Wuabish said. "You failed to disclose key parts of your history. That is fraud. That is a threat to this institution." He stopped 6 feet behind her, close enough to see the way she shifted her weight, how her stance widened by barely an inch, how her shoulders tipped forward to brace against the wind. "Turn around, Riley." She did not. "Everyone makes mistakes," she said. "Some just make more expensive ones than others." For a moment, the only sound was the wind and the far-off siren of a police car somewhere below. The shadows near the mechanical units moved. 3 figures stepped out into the light. Hank Dorsey in a black Harbor Crest security jacket that strained over his shoulders. Linda Crow in pale blue scrubs with a badge that read Senior RN, and Mark Liu in his neatly pressed suit, hospital legal counsel tie, still perfect even this late at night. They spread out in a slow arc behind Riley, cutting off the path back to the door. Hank shifted his weight from foot to foot. Linda stared at the ground just in front of Riley's heels. Mark's hands trembled slightly as he jammed them into his pockets. "Riley," Conrad said, "this could have been simple." Riley let her eyes close for half a breath, feeling the direction of the wind on her skin, the roughness of the concrete under the soles of her shoes, the way the roof vibrated faintly with the mechanical heart of the building. When she opened them, the city was still there. So was the edge. "Nothing about this place has been simple," she said. Hank took a step forward. The distance between his boots and her back shrank with each slow, deliberate movement. "It doesn't have to get ugly," he said. "If you want it ugly," he said. "It already is," Riley replied. Conrad's patience snapped like a brittle thread. "You should have stayed invisible," he said. "You come into my ER, you make a spectacle of yourself on your 3rd day. You embarrass me in front of my own board and one of our biggest donors, and you think there are no consequences." Riley smiled just barely, eyes still on the city. "I did my job," she said. "Your problem is that everyone saw it." Something in Conrad's face changed. The concern drained away, leaving something leaner and sharper in its place. "Hank," he said quietly. They rushed her together. In the freezing white light with the wind roaring, 4 shapes converged on one. Riley pivoted, hands coming up, instincts firing in the small space between thought and impact. Hank's arm closed around her left bicep. Mark grabbed for her right wrist fingers, locking down harder than he expected. Linda's palms slammed into her shoulder blades in a single desperate shove. For one fraction of a second, Riley found her balance again. Her heel caught against the edge of the warning line. Her body knew what to do, where to twist, how to drop and turn and break free. Conrad stepped in. His hands landed on her shoulders. All his weight went forward. The concrete disappeared beneath her feet. The wind hit her from underneath now, tearing the breath from her lungs. The helipad light spun away above her, replaced by the smear of windows, each one a small rectangle of yellow or blue or black sliding past too fast to count. Somewhere below, the steady beep of a monitor continued without interruption, as if nothing on the roof had changed at all. Riley did not scream. The night opened under her wide and dark and waiting, then everything went black. 3 weeks earlier, nothing about Harbor Crest looked dangerous. It was a Monday, bright and damp, the kind of Seattle morning where the clouds hung low but the streets still glistened from a night of rain. The hospital's front plaza smelled like wet concrete and espresso from the coffee kiosk near the entrance. Riley stepped through the revolving doors with a canvas messenger bag over her shoulder and a pair of clean white sneakers that squeaked slightly against the polished floor. The overhead lights were too bright, the lobby too warm, the hum of voices a steady, low murmur. She paused just inside the entrance. To anyone watching, it looked like she was just adjusting the strap of her bag. In reality, her eyes had already mapped the security desk, to the left. The bank of elevators ahead, the stairwell door tucked discreetly behind a vending machine, the cameras in the ceiling corners, the quickest path to the ER. Riley Stone. The woman striding toward her wore navy scrubs and a worn badge that identified her as Elena Cruz, RN, charge nurse. Her dark hair was pulled into a bun that had been neat at the beginning of someone's day, but not hers. Yes, Riley said. Elena offered a quick, firm handshake. Welcome to Harborcrest, she said. You picked a fun department. I heard you have good coffee, Riley replied. Elena huffed a short laugh. Rumors. Come on. Orientation in 10, but I can give you the 2-minute version that actually matters. They moved through the ER doors together. The air cooled by a few degrees, trading lobby warmth for antiseptic and adrenaline. Monitors beeped in distinct rhythms, each one a separate heartbeat in the crowded space. The smell of alcohol wipes coffee and something metallic clung to the walls. This is triage, Elena said, nodding toward a desk, where a nurse typed while a tired-looking teenager held a bloody towel to his forehead. If you stand here, you will be bumped, sneezed on, and asked for blankets every 30 seconds. Do not stand here. She pointed left. Supply room. Riley stepped inside, eyes adjusting to the softer light. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with clear-wrapped gauze labeled syringes. IV bags that caught the fluorescent light and turned it into a faint watery glow. Elena watched as Riley's gaze moved once along the shelves, then stopped. Do you want to write anything down? Elena asked. Riley shook her head. I got it, she said. Do you? Elena said. Her tone was curious, not skeptical. Riley tapped lightly in the air as if pointing to invisible labels. Gauze second shelf left side. Syringes by gauge on the right eye level. Crash cart supplies on the bottom. Elena blinked. Show off. Riley's mouth ticked up at one corner. Bad habit, she said. From somewhere down the hall, a monitor alarm changed pitch, the beeps faster, more urgent. The sound threaded into the background noise, instantly familiar to everyone who worked there. By early afternoon, Riley had merged into the ER's flow. She moved from room to room with an easy efficiency, checking IV lines, reassuring a child with a broken arm, anticipating a resident's request for a different size catheter before he finished asking. She said little, but her hands knew where to go and what to do. Nobody asked about the thin scar above her left eyebrow until lunch. They were standing near the nurse's station, picking through a box of stale muffins someone had left out. An orderly in a Seahawks hoodie squinted at her. That mark, he said. Bar fight or mountain biking. Riley touched the scar lightly, fingertips ghosting over the raised line. Hiking accident, she said. Rocks fight dirty. He laughed, accepted the answer, and walked away. Elena, leaning on the counter beside her, raised an eyebrow. That sounded practiced, she said. Riley shrugged. People like stories they recognize. The code blue came in just before 4. The overhead speakers crackled the words, snapping through the ER like an electric jolt. Code blue, incoming ambulance, adult male cardiac arrest. The doors burst open a minute later. Paramedics rolled in a stretcher carrying a man in his late 50s, skin-gray chest, rising only because of the bag valve mask pumping air into his lungs. His shirt was cut open, wires already on his chest line, already in his arm. Daniel Price, one of the medics said briskly. Chest pain on the freeway, arrested in the rig. Down for about 5, regained pulse, lost it again. Riley was at the crash cart before anyone called her name. She snapped on gloves, attached monitors, read the flickering rhythm on the screen, even as the attending physician arrived at the bedside and began barking orders. Epinephrine, he said. Already drawing, Riley answered, handing him the syringe. Charge to 50. Charging. The monitor stuttered in an ugly pattern, the digital heartbeat barely clinging to any kind of order. The beeping slipped into a strained, arrhythmic sound that grated against the nerves. Behind them, the glass doors to the ER slid open again. Dr. Conrad Vale walked in like he owned the place, which in many ways he did. The staff parted for him without thinking. His ID badge caught the light. What have we got? He asked. 58-year-old male cardiac, the attending said, compression still going. Sweat shone on his forehead. Rhythms deteriorating. Conrad stepped closer to the monitor, eyes moving over the lines and spikes with the speed of long practice. Whatever he had once felt for patients did not show on his face. What showed was certainty. He watched for 3 seconds, maybe 4. Call it, he said. His voice was calm, firm, final. Time of death. The room faltered. The attending's hands slowed. A tech glanced reflexively at the clock on the wall. The scrubs and coats around the bed seemed to draw back a fraction of an inch, making space for the pronouncement everyone had heard 100 times before. Riley did not move away from the bed. "I see organized activity," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. "He is not gone." Conrad turned his head slowly. "Nurse Stone," he said, "I have been a cardiologist longer than you have been an adult." "Then you know what ventricular tachycardia looks like when it is about to respond," she said. Her hand was already on the defibrillator controls, bumping the charge. 200, clear. She did not look at Conrad again. She looked at the monitor. "Clear," she repeated louder this time. The bodies around the bed broke contact. The man's chest heaved under the jolt, his arms twitching, the smell of singed hair briefly sharp in the air. For a heartbeat, there was only the flat hum of the machine. Then the line on the screen shifted. The spikes evened, finding a new rhythm. The beeping steadied, falling into a pattern every person in that room knew down to their bones. Sinus, regular. The attending let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "All right," he said. "Keep compressions gentle. Let's see if he holds it." Within minutes, Daniel Price's color began to return. 10 minutes later, he squeezed the hand of the resident leaning over him. On the far side of the bed, Conrad stepped back. He smoothed his tie, the motion precise, mechanical. In the doorway, 2 members of the hospital's board of directors watched with polite interest. They had come to check on a major donor who had been rushed in with a cardiac event. Now they had front row seats to his recovery. A woman in her 50s, hair streaked with gray, hurried into the room and stopped so abruptly she almost collided with the nurse. "Daniel," she whispered. "Oh God, Daniel." "Mrs. Price," the resident said quickly. "He is stable. It was close, but he is stable. One of our nurses caught a rhythm and kept going." Janet Price looked around wildly. "Who?" she asked. The resident pointed toward the head of the bed. Riley was already moving away, returning the defibrillator paddles to their housing, stripping off her gloves. Her scrubs were damp with sweat along the spine, a faint smear of Daniel's blood on her sleeve. It said. Janet crossed the room in 3 fast steps and grabbed both of Riley's hands before she could pull them back. "Thank you," she said. Her voice broke on the second word. Tears tracked through her makeup. "Thank you for not giving up on him." For a second, Riley seemed startled by the contact. Then she gave a small, steady nod. "I just read the monitor," she said. On the other side of the bed, Conrad watched. His smile was still on his face, turned toward the board members as if sharing in Janet's relief. But something tightened in his jaw, a small muscle jumping near his temple. One of the board members, a tall man in an expensive suit, clapped Conrad on the shoulder. "You have good people in your ER, Conrad," he said. "You must be proud." Conrad's eyes flicked to Riley, then back. "Harbor Crest hires the best heater?" He said. The words were right, the tone was not. Elena caught the look just for a second. She watched Conrad's gaze follow Riley as the younger nurse slipped quietly out of the room and back into the busy flow of the ER. Elena did not know yet that this was the moment everything started to tilt. She only knew that something in Conrad Vale's eyes had gone very, very cold. Conrad Vale did not drive straight home after the price code. He left the ER with his smile still pinned in place, walked the 2 board members back toward the elevators, shook their hands, accepted their praise. He nodded when they called Riley impressive and sharp and one to watch. He even recommended a good restaurant for them to take the Prices to once Daniel was out of the ICU. Then he rode the elevator alone to the administrative floor and walked down the empty corridor to his office. Harbor Crest after hours sounded different. The daytime murmur dropped to a distant hum. The overhead announcements came less often. The building's mechanical systems filled the silence with the steady exhale of air vents and the faint whine of generators. Conrad closed his office door with more care than he had closed any door in the ER. The room was all cool lines and expensive wood, the kind of decor that looked good in fundraising brochures. A wall of glass looked out over the bay, dark now, except for the scatter of boat lights and the sodium glow of the port. The city reflected faintly in the window, a ghost image overlaid on the water. He set his tablet on the desk and sat down. "Elena Cruz, yo," he murmured. "I want her evaluation folder on my desk in the morning." He caught himself and shook his head, almost amused. Old reflex. This time it was not the charge nurse that interested him. He opened the secure HR system on his computer, typed a name, and watched as a new window opened. Riley Stone, RN. Her personnel file appeared as a series of tidy sections. Licensure, education, employment history. He scrolled. Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Oregon State graduation date neatly listed. 2 years at St. Matthew's Hospital in Portland with favorable comments from a supervisor whose tone bordered on affectionate. Basic certifications current, advanced cardiac life support, pediatric advanced life support, trauma course. Conrad frowned. He scrolled back up to the top, then back down again slower this time. Between high school and nursing school, between nursing school and St. Matthew's, there was almost nothing. Dates did not line up the way lives normally did. There was a 6-year stretch that showed nothing but a single bland entry. Unspecified employment out of state. Conrad sat back in his chair. He tried the usual search. Riley Stone on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on anything that might give him a photograph from a party or a tagged group shot on a hiking trail. The results came back crowded with other Stones, other Rileys, but not hers. He refined his search with middle initial, narrowed by location, tried again. Nothing. He tried her listed college email handle. No old student society newsletters, no alumni blog photos. It was as if she had stepped onto the grid only when she decided to become a nurse and not a minute before. Conrad looked at the glass wall of his office. In the reflection, he saw himself sitting at the desk, the glow of the monitor painting his face in pale light. "Nobody is that clean," he said softly. He picked up his phone and scrolled through the contacts until he found a number he had not used in almost a year. "Marcus," he said when the line clicked. "I need you to look into a new nurse for me. Name is Riley Stone. She saved a patient today and knocked me flat in front of my own board." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Sounds like you owe her a fruit basket," Marcus Hale replied. "What do you want from me?" "I want to know what is in the 6 years she is not telling anyone about," Conrad said. "I want to know where she was, who she worked for, and why the internet acts like she did not exist." Marcus exhaled, and Conrad could picture him in his cramped office shelves full of old case files and 2 dead monitors he never bothered to throw out. "I will see what I can dig up," Marcus said. "But if she knows how to scrub, it will not be fast." "It does not need to be fast," Conrad said. "It needs to be thorough." He ended the call and stayed at his desk long after the cleaning staff finished their rounds. The screensaver on his computer cycled through photographs of Harborcrest's gleaming facade, its smiling staff, its renovated wings. Each image looked a little less solid than the one before. He did not open any of the congratulatory emails that pinged his inbox that night, thanking him for hiring such talented people. Across the city in a small 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, Riley dropped her keys in a bowl and leaned back against the door as it clicked shut. The quiet pressed in around her. No monitors, no overhead codes, no carts rattling along linoleum. The only sounds were the faint thrum of washers downstairs and the occasional car rolling past on wet asphalt outside. She toed off her sneakers and winced when she straightened. Her lower back protested the hours on her feet. Her shoulders ached with the familiar burn of fatigue. None of it bothered her. She turned on one lamp in the living room enough to soften the edges of the small space. A secondhand couch, a narrow bookshelf with a few dog-eared paperbacks, a plant that was trying its best near the window. The place smelled faintly of detergent and coffee. Riley walked straight to the closet. She opened the door and reached up to the top shelf. Her fingers found cold metal. The box was about the size of a shoebox, but heavier. Brushed steel, now scratched and dulled with a dent in one corner. The combination lock sat flush with the surface. She brought it down and set it on the bed. The numbers on the dial were familiar under her fingers. She still knew the sequence without thinking. She did not spin them. For a moment, she rested her palms flat on the lid and stared at the box. The room felt smaller with it open to the air. The hum of the laundromat below grew louder in her head, a memory trying to take shape. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She let go of the box and picked it up. A notification from an app she rarely opened. Peer support group meets Thursday, 1900. New faces welcome. There was a photograph attached, a stock image of people in folding chairs, coffee cups in their hands. Riley cleared the notification. She slid the metal box back into the closet without opening it, closed the door, and went to take a shower, hot enough to fog the mirror. When she wiped the glass with the side of her hand, the scar above her eyebrow cut a pale line through the pink flesh of her skin. She studied it for a second, then turned off the light. By the end of the week, the ER had settled around her. Her name appeared on the whiteboard schedule. Her badge worked on every door it was supposed to. The staff did not watch her with quite the same level of curiosity. She was just another set of competent hands in a department that never had enough of them. Small things started to slip. One morning she came into the staff lounge and found her locker door standing open an inch. The combination dial showed a number she did not leave it on. Inside, nothing was missing. Her wallet lay where she had left it. Her spare scrubs were still folded on the bottom shelf. She closed the door and spun the lock again this time, listening for the clicks. At the nurse's station, Elena frowned at the assignment sheets. "I thought I put you on days this week," Elena said, tracing a finger down the page. "You are on nights starting tomorrow." Riley glanced at the board. Her name glowed on the digital schedule, slotted neatly into a series of night shifts she had never discussed. "I was never told," she said. Elena shook her head. "Must have been changed after I left yesterday," she said. "Administration has been breathing down my neck about coverage. I will ask." She meant it. Riley could tell. She could also tell that Elena would probably not get a straight answer. The security cameras watched everything. Mounting points in the ceiling corners tracked the corridors and nurses' station, the entrances and exits. They had been part of Riley's mental map the first day she walked into Harborcrest, the way any point of entry or exit always was. Now when she walked down certain hallways, she felt them like small extra weights hanging just above her. In the security room down in a windowless corner of the building, Hank Dorsey sat with his boots up under the desk and his eyes on a bank of monitors. One screen showed the ER waiting room. Another showed the ambulance bay. Another showed the staff locker area where Riley had just closed her locker and walked away. Hank tapped his pen against a paper notepad and wrote down the time. On the page, her name sat in a short list. Times arrived, times left. No commentary, no color, just ink. Behind him, a younger guard shifted uneasily. "Pretty boring following a nurse around, the kid said. Hank shrugged, kept watching the screen. "Everybody is boring until they are not, he said. The cafeteria was almost empty when Elena finally got Riley to sit down for 10 minutes. Late afternoon light filtered through the high windows, flattening the colors of the plastic chairs and scuffed floor tiles. A television in the corner played a muted daytime talk show, the subtitles crawling across the bottom of the screen. Elena set a cup of coffee in front of Riley and dropped into the chair opposite her. "I had to bribe one of the residents to cover a patient just to get you to sit," Elena said. "You are making the rest of us look lazy." Riley wrapped her hands around the cup and felt the heat sink into her fingers. She had not realized how cold they were. "I do not mind moving," she said. "Yeah, I noticed." Elena stirred sugar into her own coffee, watching Riley over the small swirl. "Vale pulled your file," she said after a moment. Riley's fingers went still on the cup. "HR says he had a reason code for it, but nobody will tell me what it was," Elena continued. "He talked to AT, too. Asked about access logs to staff accounts. He does not usually take that kind of personal interest in new hires." Riley took a slow drink, giving herself a second to think. "Maybe he is just curious," she said. "Curious looks different," Elena replied. "Curious is passing by the desk and asking how you are settling in. This is more like trying to read your diary." Riley's gaze drifted to the far wall where a fire exit map was posted in a clear plastic frame. Red arrows traced routes out of the building. "He's not going to find much," she said. Elena considered that. "That is what worries me," she said. "Most people your age have more of a trail. College photos, bad hair years, something." She nodded toward Riley's forehead. "That scar. You told Mike it was hiking. You climb a lot." Riley's hand moved halfway to her eyebrow, then stopped. "Not lately," she said. Elena waited. Riley let out a breath that sounded more like surrender than relief. "I am not very good at this," she said. "At what? Small talk, lunch, being the person people ask about weekend plans." Elena smiled not unkindly. "That is not a crime," she said. "There is a lot of before," Riley said. "Before nursing, before Harborcrest. Most of it is easier to file under nothing and move on." Elena reached across the table, fingers resting near Riley's hand without touching it. "Whatever before was," she said, "you are here now. You are good at this. You know that, right?" Riley looked at her, and for a moment the guarded calm in her face slipped. Something older looked back, something that had measured risk in other kinds of rooms. "I know I am good in a crisis, she said quietly. "The rest of it, I'm still figuring out." The overhead speaker crackled, calling Elena back to the floor. She stood gathering her coffee. "I have got to go yell at a resident who thinks vitals chart themselves," she said. You need anything, you come find me. Riley nodded. She stayed in the cafeteria a moment longer, letting the sounds of clinking trays and distant footsteps settle around her. Then she finished her coffee, stood up, and followed the arrows on the fire exit map back into the maze of the hospital. Marcus Hale showed up 3 days later carrying a manila folder that was too thin to be comforting. He let himself into Conrad Vale's office without waiting for a second invitation. The administrative floor was quiet at that hour. Most of the daytime staff already gone, only a few lights left on in the long corridor. The bay outside the glass wall was a sheet of gray under low clouds. You look like someone who did not get the fruit basket, Marcus said. Conrad capped his pen and set it down with care. Tell me you found something, he said. It is a... Marcus sat placing the folder between them like a piece of evidence he was not sure how to handle. I found pieces, he said. They do not fit the way normal lives fit. He opened the folder and slid out a few printed pages. The top sheet showed a standard government header and rows of blacked-out lines. Riley Stone, Marcus said. Born in Ohio, enlisted in the Marine Corps, 19, served from 2007 to 2019, honorable discharge. Conrad's fingers tightened on the arm of his chair. Military, he said. That was not in her file. It was not meant to be, Marcus replied. He tapped one of the redacted sections. From 2012 on, everything looks like this. Locations, units, operational details, all sealed under federal statute. I called in favors and records. I tried 3 different databases. What I got was 6 years of black bars. Conrad scanned the page. The black stripes seemed to pulse against the white. What does that mean exactly? He asked. It means she did not spend those 6 years at a desk, Marcus said. Force recon most likely, special operations, maybe attached to intelligence. People with this kind of file do work in places that do not show up in brochures. They jump into bad situations and try to walk out. Conrad looked up. You are telling me I have a special forces operator stocking supplies in my ER, he said. I am telling you someone with very specific training decided to become a nurse in your ER, Marcus said. And someone very high up decided that what she did before that stays buried. He closed the folder and folded his hands on top of it. Whatever problem you think she is, Conrad, she is not the kind you fix with a nasty performance review, he added. People like her do not go down easy. For a few seconds, the only sound in the office was the muted hiss of the air conditioning. Conrad's eyes went to the glass wall. In the reflection, the hospital looked suddenly fragile, like something that could be cracked. She lied on her application, he said. She omitted years of service from her employment history. That is grounds for termination. Marcus watched him carefully. That is one way to see it, Marcus said. Another way is that she has a protective detail you cannot see. Even I could not see past this. He tapped the folder again. It takes weight to seal records like that. Conrad's jaw tightened. I am not interested in your admiration, Marcus, he said. I am interested in liability. She humiliated me in my own ER. The board is asking questions about why my clinical call nearly killed a donor whose heartbeat she managed to drag back. She has already cost me more than she's worth. Marcus rose, leaving the folder on the desk. Then you will make your decisions, he said. Just remember what I said. People who did what she did do not scare easily. He walked out the door, clicking shut behind him. Conrad sat alone in the quiet office, the thin folder in front of him, black lines staring up like censored sentences. For a brief moment, something like real fear moved through him, cold and unfamiliar. Then it burned away under something more familiar. Anger. He picked up the folder, flipped it closed, and slid it into a drawer. By evening, his version of a plan had started to take shape. The meeting did not go on any official calendar. It took place in a corner conference room that overlooked the parking garage. At 7:30 in the evening, the administrative wing felt like a different building, hollow and echoing the daytime bustle replaced by empty halls and the occasional squeak of a cleaning cart. Hank Dorsey arrived first, security jacket zipped halfway, radio clipped to his shoulder. He nodded at Conrad and took a seat without asking questions. Linda Crow came next, still in scrubs, hair pulled back tighter than usual. The lines around her mouth looked deeper in the fluorescent light. She clutched a folder to her chest, even though there was nothing in it. Mark Liu arrived last, tie loosened a little, but still perfectly knotted, phone in hand. Conrad closed the door. Thank you for coming, he said. His voice was different here. No public warmth, no polished concern. Just a flat, controlled tone. We have a situation, he continued. Her name is Riley Stone. Linda shifted in her chair. She saved Daniel Price, she said. The board is still talking about it. She contradicted me in front of the board, Conrad corrected. She challenged my judgment in the middle of a code, and the board is now wondering if I'm out of touch. That is not just a new nurse with good instincts. That is a threat. Mark cleared his throat. We can document insubordination for QAs. Mark said. Failure to follow chain of command. I can have HR start a file. In a week or two, we fire her with cause. Termination sends her somewhere else, Conrad said. Another hospital, another ER, another press story about the brave nurse who stood up to the arrogant CEO. She walks away with a story that makes me look incompetent and puts this institution under a microscope. He leaned forward. I'm not interested in giving her that kind of mobility, he said. Hank watched him, expression unreadable. How far are we taking this exactly? Hank asked. His voice was calm and professional, as if he were discussing camera placements. Conrad met his eyes. Far enough that we never have to talk about it again, he said. A silence settled over the table. Linda looked down at her hands. Her fingers twisted the edge of the empty folder until the cardboard bent. I have worked here 20 years, she said finally. My promotion, my pension, everything is tied to this place. When you say far enough, what does that look like for me? It looks like us protecting what we have built, Conrad said. It looks like making sure a person who lied her way in and undercut us in front of the board does not dismantle that from the inside. He turned his gaze to Mark. Legally speaking, he said, what is the worst-case scenario if she decides to talk about Daniel? About any of this? Mark hesitated, which he rarely did. Best case, you weather a PR storm, he said. Worst case, there are inquiries, audits, old decisions reopened, stories resurfaced that we worked very hard to keep out of the papers. He did not have to name those stories. Hank shifted his weight chair, creaking. Accidents happen, he said. People have episodes. Nurses burn out. They jump. That is what the papers say, if we are careful. Linda looked up sharply. You want to stage a suicide? She said. Her voice came out thinner than she intended. I want to remove a threat, Conrad replied, in a way that leaves nothing for anyone to pull on. He let the words hang in the air. Hank ran a hand over his jaw, then nodded once. It would have to be somewhere without cameras, Hank said, or with just enough coverage to make it look like she was alone. Late, no witnesses. The roof, Conrad said. Helipad access, minimal coverage. No patients, no visitors. He looked to Mark. We make sure she is there, Mark said slowly. We send a message saying there are discrepancies in her file. Licensing questions. Threaten to report her if she does not show. Nobody in her position ignores that. Linda swallowed. Riley is not stupid, she said. She's exactly the kind of person who would rather face a problem head-on than hide from it, Conrad said. She will come. The details followed. Time, access. Who would be seen where and when? They spoke in clinical phrases, keeping their voices low as if volume could change the weight of what they were agreeing to. When the meeting ended, Hank left first, then Mark. Linda lingered at the door, hand on the frame. Are you sure about this? She asked, not quite looking at Conrad. He did not hesitate. I'm sure about what happens if we do nothing, he said. She nodded without conviction and walked away. The message reached Riley at the end of a long shift. She was in the locker room, halfway through changing out of her scrubs, when her phone buzzed on the bench. A notification from the hospital's internal messaging system flashed on the screen. Sender Office of Dr. Conrad Vale. Credential discrepancies found. Meet on rooftop helipad at 2300 to discuss before formal report to State Board. Come alone. She read it twice. Fluorescent light hummed overhead, washing the room in a tired yellow. The air smelled of detergent and the sharp tang of antiseptic wipes. Down the hall, a cart rattled past. Riley sat down on the bench. Her heart did not speed up, it slowed. The wording of the message laid itself out in her mind like a diagram. Isolated location. Late hour. Explicit threat attached to compliance. No mention of a third party, no suggestion of HR or union presence, just her and Conrad in the roof. She had seen this pattern before in different clothes. Meet points that were just off usual routes. Requests that arrived with just enough urgency to keep people from asking questions. Instructions to come alone. She deleted the message. The locker door clanged shut when she closed it. The sound echoed more loudly than it should have. Riley pulled on her jacket and walked out. Elena caught up to her in the hallway before the exit. Hey, Elena said. You look like you just ate something that disagreed with you. I am fine, Riley said. That is your least convincing line, Elena replied. She lowered her voice. Vale spent half the day upstairs with security and legal. Hank has been digging through camera archives. Nobody tells me anything, but I do not like the smell of it. They reached the door that led to the parking garage. The push bar gleamed under the emergency light. Do me a favor, Elena said. Do not meet with him alone. Not in his office, not anywhere off the floor. If he wants to talk credentials, he can do it with HR present. Riley's hand hovered over the bar. I have walked into worse rooms with worse people, she said quietly. That is not comforting, Elena said. It should be, Riley answered. She pushed the door open and stepped into the cool concrete air of the garage. The city glowed beyond the open side of the structure, streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. She stood for a moment listening to the distant rush of tires on the freeway and the occasional echo of a car door slamming somewhere below. Then she went home. In her apartment, the routines repeated. Keys in the bowl, shoes off by the door, lamp on, closet door open. This time, when she took down the metal box, she set it on the table instead of the bed. She turned the dial. The lock clicked open. Inside were simple things. A pair of worn dog tags, a photograph of a squad in desert gear faces half hidden by dust and goggles, a challenge coin with a unit insignia, a strip of black fabric that had once been taped around her wrist. She picked up the fabric and wrapped it around her left wrist out of habit, then changed her mind and reached for the roll of athletic tape instead. She wrapped both wrists neat and snug, not too tight. In the bedroom, she traded her scrubs for dark jeans and a long-sleeved black shirt that left her shoulders free and her movements easy. She laced up running shoes with flat, grippy soles. She checked the time on her phone. 22:10. In the bathroom mirror, her reflection looked back without expression. The scar over her eyebrow stood out a pale hook above steady eyes. Riley turned off the light, picked up her keys, and walked out into the night. Riley drove back to Harbor Crest with the radio off. The streets were slick with recent rain traffic thin. The usual city noise softened under the low clouds. The hospital rose ahead of her, a stack of lit windows against the darker sky. From this angle, it looked the way it did on the brochures, solid and reassuring. She pulled into a side entrance of the parking garage instead of the main staff level and chose a corner spot on the third floor, away from the cameras she had already mapped in her head. The concrete around her was stained with oil and faint tire tracks, the air smelling of damp stone and exhaust. For a moment, she sat with her hands on the steering wheel and her eyes closed. The quiet inside the car was thin. Beneath it, she could still hear the layered sounds of Harbor Crest as she knew it, the beeping of monitors, the murmur of voices, the rattle of carts. The building was a living thing from the inside. From out here, it was just concrete and glass. At 22:45, she got out and locked the car. She did not wear her badge around her neck. She clipped it instead to her waistband, half hidden by her jacket. Her dark clothes blended into the garage shadows when she moved. She took the stairwell instead of the elevator, feet steady on the metal steps, handlight on the rail. The hospital entrance for staff opened with a soft hiss of air. Night shift lighting made the corridors narrower, the colors muted. She passed a custodian mopping near radiology. He nodded to her without curiosity. Riley answered with a small lift of her chin and kept walking. The elevator that served the rooftop helipad sat at the far end of a less-used corridor near surgical. At this hour, it was deserted. A single camera watched the doors. Riley paused a few steps short of its field of view and checked her phone. 22:58. She stepped forward, pressed the call button, and lifted her gaze to the small dark glass of the camera bubble. Her face was flat, unreadable. The elevator arrived with a reluctant chime. She stepped in and pressed the button for the roof. The doors slid shut. For the length of the ride, she had nothing to look at but her own reflection in the brushed metal panel, the outline of her shoulders, the pale half-circle of the scar above her eyebrow. The elevator shuddered to a stop. The doors opened onto a short corridor that ended in a heavy metal door marked Rooftop Access Helipad. Riley could feel the air change colder, thinner coming through the gap at the bottom of the door. She put her hand on the bar and pushed. The rooftop greeted her with wind. It hit hard and clean, rushing off the bay and across the concrete, carrying the smell of salt rain that had not yet fallen and the faint burn of aircraft fuel. The helipad lights cast a hard white circle in the center of the roof, leaving the corners in deeper shadow. She stepped out and let the door close behind her. The city spread beyond the low safety rail lights, flickering in patterns that suggested lives she would never know. Cars moved along the freeway like a slow glowing river. Harbor Crest's own reflection in the glass of neighboring buildings looked almost like a second hospital hanging upside down in the night. Riley. Conrad Vale stood near the middle of the helipad, hands in the pockets of his coat shoulders squared against the wind. The light above him left shadows under his eyes. "You are punctual, Davo," he said. "You told me my license was at risk," Riley answered. "I read the message." "No copies then," he said. "Good." She did not respond. Her steps carried her closer until there was about 15 feet of space between them. She stopped just outside the brightest pool of light. The wind tugged at her shirt, flattened the fabric against her ribs. On another night, in another place, this could have been nothing more than a tense meeting about paperwork and policies. Conrad took a folded sheet of paper from his pocket and held it up like a formal charge list. You falsified your application, he said. You omitted 12 years of military service from your history. You misrepresented yourself to this institution and to the state board. He let the paper flutter slightly in his hand. I could end your career with this, he said. You know that. Riley's face did not change. You could have asked about it in your office, she said. During the day, with HR. This is between you and me, Conrad said. You and the man whose authority you challenged in front of a patient, his family, and my board. Her gaze shifted past his shoulder for a fraction of a second toward the corner of the roof where she knew the nearest camera sat. From that angle, it would catch only the edge of the helipad, the hint of figures in motion if they came closer to the rail. You are very invested in what that board thinks of you, she said. I have spent 30 years keeping this hospital afloat, he replied. Balancing budgets, courting donors, making decisions none of you on the floor want to make. I will not have that undermined by someone who shows up out of nowhere and plays hero. Riley let the words sit between them. I did my job, she said. You were calling a time of death that did not belong to you. Anger flared in his eyes, bright and clean. You do not get to say that to me, he said. Not after what I have done for this place. Not after what I know can happen when people second-guess the chain of command. The rooftop door opened again with a metallic thud. Riley did not flinch, but the muscles in her neck tightened. Hank Dorsey stepped out first, his security jacket dark against the concrete. Linda followed, arms wrapped around herself against the wind, despite her scrubs. Mark came last, coat collar turned up, eyes already avoiding Riley's. They moved out from the wall in a slow line and began to arc around behind her. Her body tracked them without movement. She felt the shift in the air, rather than watched it, the change in pressure as more people stepped into the open space. Conrad took a step closer. This is what happens here, George. He said, when you forget who holds the power here. The distance between Riley and the edge was about 3 feet. She could feel it in the way the wind curled up from below, tugging at her clothes. The safety rail was low, designed to keep people from wandering too close, not to stop someone who was pushed. She adjusted her stance, barely perceptible feet, a little wider knees, soft weight in the balls of her feet. Hank stopped about 12 feet to her left. Linda drifted 10 feet back and slightly behind. Mark hovered 8 feet away on her right hands, down at his sides, fingers clenched. Sorry about the stone, Hank said. His voice carried easily over the wind. Nothing personal. It never is, Riley said. Conrad moved into her peripheral vision now, only 6 feet away. For a beat, all 4 of them were still. In that beat, Riley counted. 1 path behind her, 3 bodies converging, 1 low rail, 7 stories of air. Hank lunged first. He came in fast, leading with his shoulder, trying to overwhelm her with weight and momentum. Riley pivoted hard to the right, letting his bulk graze past instead of slam into her. Her left hand shot out toward his elbow, ready to redirect, but Mark was already grabbing for her wrist. His fingers closed around her right arm and locked tight. The athletic tape bit into her skin as he squeezed. Linda hit her from behind. Both hands on Riley's shoulder blades, driving forward with all the force a smaller frame could gather. It did not have to be much. It only had to break balance. Riley tried to drop her center of gravity. Her knees bent. Her weight shifted back. Her training screamed for space to twist, to turn, to use Mark's grip to throw him off. Conrad reached her. His hands came down on her shoulders, 10 fingers digging in. For a moment their eyes met his. Above her, hers, lifted calm even now. Then he pushed. The combination of forces tipped her beyond the point of recovery. Her heels slid over painted concrete. For one strange instant, her toes caught the edge of the warning line, and she felt the exact place where solid ground ended. The rail brushed her thighs, then was gone. The world dropped away. Wind roared up around her, tugging at her clothes, tearing the breath from her lungs. The helipad light spun out of her view. Windows streaked past, some lit, some dark, a blur of glass and frames. The air was colder away from the surface of the roof, thin and sharp. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. She tucked her chin, brought her arms in, tightened her core. The feeling of falling was not new. The context was wrong concrete. Instead of sky hospital, instead of open desert air, but gravity did not care. As she dropped past the level of the 6th floor, something caught her eye. A maintenance balcony jutted from the side of the building, a metal lattice with a canvas awning stretched over it. The fabric was faded and stained, sagging slightly, but still attached along its frame. It was not designed to hold a person. It did not have to hold for long. Riley angled her body toward it, minor adjustments of shoulders and knees that changed her trajectory just enough. The edge of the awning met her at an oblique angle. She hit shoulder first. The canvas snapped under the impact, tearing along a seam. The metal crossbars bowed, screeched, then slowed her trading speed for noise and pain. Her body rolled momentum, carrying her across the narrow balcony and into the low railing. Her ribs lit up white-hot along her left side. The breath left her in a single hard burst. Her fingers scrabbled for purchase on the railing, hooked for half a second, then slipped. The ground still waited below. Another level down, someone had covered a stack of construction materials with a heavy plastic tarp. From above, it looked like a dark rectangle against the lighter concrete. From Riley's perspective, it was the only soft surface in a radius of several yards. She hit it flat on her back. The tarp bowed under her like a hammock, the straps securing it to the pallets, straining and then holding. The plastic cradled her, cushioning the last of the fall with a deep, shuddering bounce. For 5 seconds, she did not move. Her world narrowed to the sound of her own breathing, rough and shallow, and the scatter of pain across her body. She cataloged it without drama. Left rib sharp on inhale, at least one cracked, maybe two, left wrist throbbing, not fully broken, right shoulder bruised. Face warm trickle above her eyebrow, the old scar split open, blood sliding down into her eye. She rolled carefully onto her side and slid off the tarp. Her feet hit the ground. The hospital loomed above her, all glass and concrete and light. She tilted her head back, squinting through the blood in her eye, and picked out the roof line. 4 figures stood along the edge, small at that distance, but distinct in their grouping. 1 slightly ahead, 3 behind. Riley did not raise a hand or call up to them. She stood there in the shadow of the building, drawing slow, careful breaths, and let her gaze lock on the shape she knew was Conrad Vale. Even 7 stories up, she could feel him see her. 3 long seconds passed. Then she turned away from the open space and disappeared into the mouth of a service corridor, leaving the roof to its wind and its witnesses. The service corridor was almost silent. Concrete walls exposed pipes, dim utility lights at odd intervals. The air smelled of dust, metal, and old bleach. Riley moved slowly, at first one hand to the wall for balance until she was sure her legs would hold. They held. She followed the narrow hallway until it connected to a maintenance stairwell. No cameras here, just chipped paint and a smear of something that might have been grease on the railing. Each step down pressed on her injured ribs. She counted them not to distract herself, but to measure exactly how much her body was willing to do. At the basement level, she slipped into another corridor, this one lined with unmarked doors. Somewhere above the main hospital moved through its night rhythm. Down here, the building felt like a backstage no one remembered to design. She stopped outside a door labeled IT Equipment Storage and listened. Nothing, no voices, no footsteps. She tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside the room was crowded with old monitors, coiled cables, and a faint smell of overheated plastic. A single computer terminal sat on a metal table near the back, screensaver drifting across the dark glass. Riley pulled out the chair and sat carefully. She woke the terminal, logged in with her staff credentials, and opened the hospital intranet. The keyboard felt slightly sticky under her fingers. She moved anyway, fingers precise, ribs complaining. She composed 3 messages, 1 to the Washington State Medical Commission, 1 to the Harbor Crest Board of Directors, 1 to a public tip line at the FBI field office, whose number she had memorized years ago for reasons that had nothing to do with hospitals. Subject line identical. Attempted homicide at Harbor Crest Medical Center rooftop helipad. She wrote the body of the message the way she would have written an incident report in the field. Time, location, names, no adjectives, no speculation. She listed Conrad Vale, Hank Dorsey, Linda Crow, Mark Liu. She described the rooftop, the lack of cameras facing the helipad, the one misaligned camera facing northwest that might catch the edge of the scene. She ended each message with the same sentence. Security camera C4 northwest maintenance angle will show the attack. She read each email once, sent it, and watched the small confirmation pop up into the corner of the screen. Sent, sent, sent. The room seemed quieter when she logged out. The adrenaline that had carried her from the tarp to the keyboard drained in a slow, steady leak. Whatever painkillers she had taken after previous falls were not in reach tonight. Riley stood up, swayed, and caught herself on the table. Time to find someone who would insist on x-rays before they let her anywhere near another patient. By 7 in the morning, 2 men in suits were standing in the security office with a warrant in one gloved hand. The night shift supervisor, a compact man, with 15 years at Harbor Crest and a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Dad," squinted at the document, then at the badges. "You want all rooftop footage from last night?" he said. "There is not much to get. We do not point a lot of cameras up there. People do not usually go on the roof unless the helicopter comes in." One of the agents, older with a tired face and clear eyes, nodded toward the monitor bank. "We will take what you have." he said. Start around 22:30, go through to midnight. The supervisor pulled up the list of camera feeds, fingers tapping keys in well-worn patterns. He clicked through angles, stairwell doors, parking levels, loading dock, maintenance hallway. Rooftop east, nothing, he said. A grainy image of empty concrete filled one screen. Rooftop south, still nothing. We keep those more for weather checks. The other agent Younger flipped through a printout. Email mentioned camera C4 Northwest maintenance, he said it was out of position. The supervisor froze with his hand on the mouse. Oh, he said, that one. He clicked again. A new image filled the screen. It showed the edge of the helipad from an oblique angle, as if someone had bumped the camera during a storm and never bothered to fix it. The bulk of a ventilation unit filled the right side of the frame. Beyond it, the lower half of a door. The safety rail. A strip of skyline. Been meaning to get maintenance to straighten that, the supervisor said. Low priority. Not today, Violette. Wasn't day, the older agent said. Run it, the younger one added. The footage played in slightly accelerated silence. At 22:58, the rooftop door opened. A figure stepped out. Dark clothes, dark hair pulled back. No hesitation in her stride. Riley. She walked forward until she was just barely inside the camera's field. The angle caught only her profile and the line of her shoulders. A minute later, Conrad emerged into view. The camera showed his face clearly as he moved toward Riley. His mouth moved, his hands gestured. The agents could not hear the words, but they did not need to. Then Hank, Linda, and Mark appeared one by one, fanning out. The four of them formed a half circle around her. The room went very quiet. On screen, they rushed her. Hank's arm clamped around one of her limbs, Mark's around another. Linda shoved from behind. Conrad stepped in. His hands landed on her shoulders, fingers closing. For a frozen instant, he looked directly toward the camera. Then Riley went backward over the edge and out of frame. The supervisor swallowed. That is not going to look good in court, he said, voice faint. The older agent reached out and hit pause. Can you save that clip, he asked, and all related rooftop footage to a separate drive for evidence? The supervisor nodded. Yes, he said, I can do that. His hands shook a little as he reached for a fresh external drive. By 8:15, a maintenance technician named Carlos Mendez was sitting at a table in a small consultation room with his hard hat on the chair beside him and a white paper cup of coffee cooling between his palms. The younger FBI agent sat across from him, a notepad open, pen ready. You were working on the 6th floor HVAC last night, the agent said. Around 11. Carlos nodded. Yeah, he said. Filters in the vents near the patient rooms. It is loud sometimes up there, but you get used to it. Did you hear anything unusual? The agent asked. Carlos stared down into his coffee. I heard shouting, he said. Yeah? Yadu said. It was muffled like from outside. I figured maybe a helicopter came in and people were moving fast. Then I heard something hit like someone dropped equipment. I went to the stairwell window and looked up. He swallowed. I saw 4 people on the roof, he said. 3 in scrubs and jackets, 1 in a suit. They had someone between them. She went over the edge. I saw her fall past the 6th floor. The pen on the notepad paused. Did you report what you saw? The agent asked. Carlos shook his head, shame in the tight set of his mouth. Mr. Vale runs this place, Fafhimi's had. He hires fires, decides contracts. I am the guy who changes filters. Who is going to believe me if I say I saw the CEO push someone off the roof? The agent let that sit for a moment. I believe you, he said finally, and the camera does too. Carlos looked up, relief and fear tangled together in his eyes. The arrests started just after 9. Hank Dorsey answered his front door in a Harbor Crest t-shirt and sweatpants, hair still damp from the shower. 2 agents stood on his porch with a warrant and a set of handcuffs. Henry Dorsey, one of them said, you are under arrest for attempted homicide and conspiracy. For a moment, Hank considered closing the door. Then he saw the uniforms on the sidewalk behind them and thought about the rooftop footage. I want a lawyer, he said automatically. You can have one, the agent replied. You can also help yourself by talking now. By the time they closed the car door on him, the calculations had already started behind his eyes. Linda Crow was taken from her kitchen table, still in her pajamas, a cereal bowl untouched in front of her. Her hands shook so badly she could not get her shoes on without help. Mark Liu was picked up in the parking lot of his condo building briefcase in hand-suit jacket over his arm. He tried to talk past the badges. This is ridiculous, he said. I said, you cannot just show up at my home and drag me off without cause. The agent holding his elbow glanced at him. Attempted murder caught on hospital video is cause, she said. At 9:12, Conrad Vale strode into Harbor Crest through the executive entrance carrying a to-go cup of black coffee and a phone already glowing in his palm. He had not slept, but he had showered, shaved, and put on the armor of a perfectly tailored suit. His assistant stood up from her desk as he passed. Dr. Vale, she said, there are some men in your office. They said they needed to speak to you urgently. He opened his office door. 2 agents waited inside backs to the window warrant on the desk. Dr. Conrad Vale, the older one said, you are under arrest for attempted homicide, conspiracy, and assault with intent to kill. The coffee slipped from Conrad's hand. The lid stayed on the cup, landing on the carpet with a soft thud. You have the wrong idea, he said. His voice sounded distant in his own ears. There was an incident. She was distraught. She jumped. I tried to stop her. The younger agent looked at him steadily. We have video of you pushing her, he said. We have a witness who saw her fall. We have your security chief talking to us right now about the meeting you called to plan it. For a second, Conrad's world narrowed to one point. Where is she? He asked. Riley, where's the body? The older agent did not bother to hide his reaction. In a conference room downstairs, he said, giving her statement. He added nothing else. The agents guided Conrad's hands behind his back. The cuffs clicked shut, metal against bone. For the first time since he had walked into Harborcrest as CEO, Conrad Vale did not feel in control of a single thing. The main conference room on the second floor had seen its share of budgets, strategic plans, and quiet firings. It had not often seen 4 federal agents and the entire board of directors in the same space. The floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, the glass still streaked slightly with last night's rain. The long table in the center of the room had crafts of coffee and untouched pastries lined up neatly along one side. At the far end of the table, Riley sat with her left wrist in a compression bandage and a fresh strip of white tape over the scar on her forehead. A hospital blanket draped over her shoulders, more for the benefit of everyone watching than for warmth. Agent Parker, the younger of the 2 from the security office, sat at her right. Agent Morales, the older one, leaned against the wall near the door, listening. On the other side of the table, 7 board members occupied their seats. Some looked directly at Riley, some looked anywhere but. Dr. Evelyn Hart. The board chair cleared her throat. Ms. Stone, she said, first, are you well enough to be here? We can postpone if needed. Riley's voice was steady. I'm fine to talk, she said. Radiology cleared me of anything that needs emergency surgery. Evelyn nodded. Agent Parker has briefed us on the basics, she said. We have also seen the footage. I would like certain things on the record formally. She glanced at Parker, who flipped open a folder. For the record, Parker said, looking down at the page, Riley Stone served in the United States Marine Corps from 2007 to 2019 with assignments that remain sealed under federal statute. She received multiple commendations for actions in combat theaters that are not publicly detailed. Her discharge was honorable. One of the board members, a younger man with a 2-new suit and dark circles under his eyes, shifted forward. None of that appears in your personnel file, he said to Riley. Not the service, not the commendations, nothing. It does not, Riley said. Why? He asked. With that background, you could have walked into any hospital. We would have hired you on the spot. Riley studied the grain of the conference table for a moment, tracing one line in the wood with her eyes. I did not want to be the veteran on the floor, she said, or the story, or the person people watched out of the corner of their eye waiting for me to snap. I wanted to start over, learn a different job, do it well, that was all. She lifted her gaze. I did not lie about my qualifications, Bisset, she added. I met every requirement to be here. I left out parts of my life that are locked behind other doors for reasons I did not choose. Evelyn listened with her hands folded. We owe you an apology, she said finally. We allowed a culture to grow here where questioning decisions became dangerous, where one man held too much unchecked power. Riley shook her head. You owe your patients an apology, she said. You owe Daniel Price an apology that your CEO tried to call his time of death early. You owe every nurse who swallowed their concern because they were afraid of retaliation. You owe every technician who saw something wrong and convinced themselves it was safer to stay quiet. Silence settled over the table. Outside, a siren wailed, then faded. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped in a pattern everyone in the room could recognize without thinking. Evelyn let out a breath. After today, Dr. Vale will have no further role at Harborcrest, she said. We will cooperate fully with the investigation. We will review every policy that allowed this to happen. She looked at Riley. You have been through a great deal at our hands in a short time, she said. What do you want from us now? Riley considered the question. I want to go back to work, she said. One of the older board members stared at her. After being thrown off the roof, he said. After all of this, you want to go back to the ER. Riley gave a small, tired smile. There are patients in those rooms who do not care what happened on the roof, she said. They care if someone shows up when the monitor starts screaming and knows which end of the defibrillator is which. She rested her good hand flat on the table. I am good at that part, she said. I would like to keep doing it. No one argued. 6 months later, the courthouse smelled like old paper and floor polish. Reporters clustered on the steps outside, cameras trained on the front doors, microphones ready. By the time they started their live shots, the verdicts were already entered, the sentences already read. In courtroom 4B, the last of the spectators filed out, murmuring in low voices. The judge remained a moment longer, reading over his notes as the deputies moved the defendants. Conrad Vale stood where the defense table met the rail wrists cuffed in front of him. His suit hung a little looser than it had half a year ago. The silver at his temples looked whiter. "This court has considered your position of trust," the judge had said a few minutes earlier, "the power you held and the way you chose to use it. 15 years in federal prison, no parole for at least 12. Conrad had not reacted. Not outwardly. His face had settled into a flat mask sometime around the word guilty and had not shifted since. Hank Dorsey had taken his 8-year sentence with a grim nod, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. When the judge mentioned his cooperation and the reduction that came with it, he had flinched as if the word itself stung. Linda Crow had cried. 5 years as an accessory. She clutched a tissue in both hands and told the judge that she had been scared, that she had done what she was told. The security footage and her own signature on certain memos had spoken louder than her apology. Mark Liu had tried to argue the law with the court even as the sentence was being read. 6 years for conspiracy and obstruction, his legal knowledge turned against him in the language of the judgment. When the deputies took him by the arm, he kept talking for a few steps before the words ran out. Outside, the news anchors gave their simplified summaries. Inside Harborcrest, the changes had already begun. The framed photograph of Conrad shaking hands with a senator was gone from the administrative hallway. His name had been removed from the donor plaques and the glossy brochure mock-ups. The executive suite on the top floor felt less like a fortress and more like a place where people actually worked. Dr. Evelyn Hart sat in what had once been Conrad's office and signed off on a set of new policies. Anonymous reporting channels with external oversight. Mandatory education on retaliation and power imbalance. Clear procedures for raising clinical concerns that did not route through a single person. On the clinical side, the changes showed up in smaller ways. The whiteboard in the break room had a new corner where someone had written in dry erase marker, "If it feels wrong, say it. If no one listens, write it down and keep writing." In the ER, a small plaque appeared on the wall near the nurses' station. No one admitted to ordering it, but the facilities department had mounted it all the same. In recognition of the staff who put patients first, even when it is hard. No names, no dates. The meaning was clear anyway. Riley heard about the sentences in a staff meeting where Agent Parker gave a brief factual update and answered a handful of questions. She listened, nodded, and then asked for her assignment grid for the week. Her days looked different now. Some shifts she still wore navy scrubs and moved through the ER as she always had, checking vitals, answering call lights, responding to codes. Other days she worked from an office near quality improvement with Director of Patient Safety and Nursing Practice printed on the glass. She had argued against the title. "Just Riley is fine," she had told Evelyn. "You are getting the title in the office," Evelyn had replied. "What you do with them is up to you." Riley compromised by spending as little time in the office as she could get away with. Once a month on a Thursday, Daniel Price walked through the ER doors in the street clothes, his visitor badge dangling from a lanyard. He never came empty-handed. The first time it was a bouquet. Riley had looked at the flowers at his hopeful expression and gently redirected him to the nurse's station. "Put them there," she had said. "They will go further." After that, he brought food. Donuts 1 month, breakfast sandwiches the next. Someone started calling those visits Daniel days. No one complained. He always found Riley before he left. "You look better," he said one morning about 8 weeks after the sentencing. "Less like you lost a fight with a wall." "My ribs agree," she said. "The wall has been forgiven." They shared a small smile. Neither of them leaned too hard into the past. It was enough that his heart was still beating and that she still showed up when other monitors screamed. On a soft spring afternoon, Riley stood in one of the hospital's training rooms with a group of 5 newly hired nurses in a semicircle around her. A CPR mannequin lay on the bed in front of them, chest exposed, plastic skin, already a little scuffed from practice compressions. A portable monitor sat on a stand at the head of the bed, its screen showing a simulated rhythm, the gentle rise and fall of a healthy heart. "Codes look messy," Riley said. "They sound messy. People move fast and talk over each other. The thing that cuts through that is you knowing what you are looking at and what comes next." She tapped the monitor. "If this changes, your first job is not to freeze," she said. "You do not have to be fearless. You just have to be useful." The group watched her, some with nervous smiles, some with furrowed brows. One of them, a young woman with a fresh degree and a coffee stain on her sleeve, raised her hand. "What if someone tells us to stop?" she asked. "And we really think we should keep going?" Riley held her gaze. Then you say what you see, she said. You say it clearly. You back it up with the monitor with your training, and you document everything. From the doorway, Elena Cruz leaned against the frame, arms folded, listening with an expression that mixed pride and something maternal. Is that military wisdom? Elena called out, breaking the tension just enough. Riley's smile reached her eyes. That is human wisdom, she said. The portable monitor beeped in a steady, reassuring pattern. The sound threaded into the background noise of the hospital the way it always had, but now it seemed a little less taken for granted. Later, when the training ended and the new nurses scattered back into the building, Riley rode the elevator up to a floor she rarely visited. The staff lounge on the 8th floor had a wall of windows that looked out over the city and the bay beyond. The rain had cleared earlier in the day. The sky was streaked with faint bands of color as the sun moved lower, the water catching bits of light. She stood close to the glass. From here, the edge was different. There was no open drop, no wind tearing at her clothes, only a solid pane between her and the height. Her reflection floated over the city, faint, but present, the small white line of the scar on her forehead barely visible now. Cars moved along the freeway in smooth streams. Ferry boats crossed the bay, leaving white wakes behind them. Somewhere far below, an ambulance siren rose and fell. Riley watched until her breath fogged the glass, then stepped back. There was a shift to start downstairs aboard to check a list of patients whose names she did not know yet. She turned away from the window and walked back toward the elevators, the sounds of Harbor Crest rising to meet her. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.